Moving out of a toxic HOA was supposed to bring peace, but I never imagined it would end in chaos. HOA Karen called the cops on me for simply packing my boxes, demanding I be arrested. She thought she had won, until my son showed his badge and turned the tables. The final morning in that neighborhood should have been peaceful. After 15 years of living under the heavy shadow of the HOA, I was finally moving on. The air smelled fresh with the lingering dew of early autumn. Birds chirped faintly in the oak trees lining the street, and the soft rustle of leaves whispered like a farewell blessing. But beneath that calm, my heart was restless. Every memory of that HOA, every fine, every letter, every petty violation, clung to me like a weight I couldn't shake. The very first year I moved in, they had fined me for leaving my trash can out past 10 a.m. on collection day. The second year, I received a warning for painting my shutters a shade of blue that did not conform to community guidelines. By the fifth year, it wasn't just rules, it was surveillance. Karen, the self-appointed watchdog of the neighborhood, made it her mission to patrol the street like a sheriff from an old Western movie. She had a notebook, binoculars, and the arrogance of someone who believed her word was law. So as I sat on the tailgate of my silver pickup truck, surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled fragile, there was more than just furniture packed up. There were 15 years of frustration, anger, and humiliation in those boxes. Leaving wasn't just a move, it was freedom. The driveway was cluttered with memories, rolled up rugs, plastic tubs filled with old family photos, lamps wrapped in newspaper, and the last of the kitchenware. My wife, Diane, had already taken a carload to the new place, a quiet home just outside city limits where the nearest HOA was a friendly wave from a farmer across the fence. I wiped sweat from my brow, leaned back on my hands, and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. This is it. One last load. One last time I'll ever see Karen marching up my driveway with a clipboard. But peace in that neighborhood was always temporary. It started with the sound of sneakers slapping against the pavement. I looked up and saw her. Karen, the HOA tyrant. Her silver hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her pastel blue hoodie zipped up tight despite the warm day, and her phone already glued to her ear. Her stride was fast and purposeful like a storm cloud rolling in. "There you are," she barked, voice carrying down the quiet street. "I knew you'd try to sneak away without clearing this with the HOA. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and forced a calm tone. "Good morning, Karen. I'm just moving out. Nothing illegal about that." She jabbed her finger at the boxes. "Illegal? Oh, you just wait. You haven't paid the quarterly HOA dues, and you didn't submit the move-out form. This is unauthorized activity." I chuckled. A move-out form? That was a new one. "Karen, I sold the house. I don't need your permission to leave." Her face turned redder by the second. She raised her voice, her phone still pressed to her ear. "Don't you mock me! I'm calling the police!" I blinked. The police? For what, moving my own belongings? But Karen wasn't listening. She was already speaking loudly into the phone. "Yes, officer, I need you to come right away. There's a man trespassing and refusing to comply with HOA rules." I laughed in disbelief, shaking my head. "You've lost your mind." Minutes later, I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on asphalt. 3 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing but sirens off. Doors opened, and 3 uniformed officers stepped out. They looked around, confusion already written on their faces. One officer, tall and broad-shouldered, approached. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance?" Before I could answer, Karen leapt forward, practically blocking his path. "Yes, arrest him immediately! He's trespassing and refusing to obey HOA policies." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, trespassing usually applies to someone being on property that doesn't belong to them. Is this his residence?" Karen's eyes widened, indignant. "It was, but he can't leave until he pays the HOA and files the right paperwork. He's in violation of community code." I raised my hand slightly. "Officer, I'm the homeowner. This is my property until the closing date next week. I'm simply moving out, that's all." The officer turned to me, looking at the moving boxes, the truck, the rolled-up rugs. He nodded slowly, clearly recognizing the absurdity of the situation. "This doesn't look like a criminal matter." Karen nearly exploded. her face twisted in rage, her hands shaking as she pointed at me. "Are you blind? He's breaking the rules. This neighborhood is protected by HOA law." The other two officers shifted uncomfortably. One muttered under his breath, "HOA law isn't criminal law." I exhaled, grateful at least that they seemed to recognize the ridiculousness. But still, Karen wouldn't stop. She paced like a caged animal, shouting about fines, codes, bylaws, and threats of lawsuits. Her voice echoed off the stone gates of the neighborhood entrance. And just as I thought things couldn't get worse, I saw a familiar black SUV turn onto the street. My son had arrived. The officers were already uneasy, caught between a woman screeching about community code violations and me, a man just trying to load boxes into his truck. But the second that black SUV pulled up, the entire energy shifted. It was my son. The sound of the engine cut off, and the door opened with deliberate calm. Out stepped Detective Jameson, my son, my pride, my steady rock in this storm. He wasn't in uniform, just a fitted jacket, dark jeans, and boots that carried the weight of confidence with every step. His short-cropped hair and sharp gaze instantly commanded attention, and even though he hadn't spoken yet, the officers on scene straightened up unconsciously. "Dad," he said, voice low but firm, "everything all right here?" Before I could answer, Karen's shrill voice cut through the air. "And who is this? Another accomplice? Oh, don't think you can bring backup to defy the HOA." Her finger jabbed toward him like a spear, her face flushed crimson. The three officers exchanged glances, looking relieved that maybe someone new could calm her down. My son glanced at me, then at her. His eyes narrowed, reading the situation instantly like a seasoned detective does at a crime scene. He didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger, he didn't need to. Calm authority radiated off him like heat. "I'm going to ask politely," he said, his voice carrying a quiet edge that silenced even the nearby neighbors who had started peeking out from behind their curtains. "What exactly is going on here?" Karen spun toward him, her voice cracking with self-righteous fury. "What's going on is that this man," she pointed at me again, her finger trembling with rage, "is committing a crime. He's moving out without permission. He hasn't filed his paperwork with the HOA, hasn't paid his dues, and he refuses to comply with community code. That's theft of HOA services and trespassing." The absurdity of her words hung in the air. The officers looked bewildered, caught between amusement and exasperation. My son let the silence linger for a long, deliberate beat. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his leather badge holder. With a flick of his hand, the badge gleamed in the sunlight as he held it up, steady and sure. "Detective Jameson, County Sheriff's Office," he said evenly. "And from where I'm standing, it looks like you're filing a false police report, wasting department resources, and harassing my father on his own property." The effect was immediate. The officers straightened, their demeanor shifting to one of professional respect. Karen, however, froze in place. Her mouth fell open, and her eyes darted wildly between me, my son, and the officers. You can't be serious," she stammered, her voice suddenly smaller. "Oh, I'm very serious," my son replied, tucking his badge back into his pocket but keeping his stance firm. "Do you realize what you've just done? Calling law enforcement under false pretenses is not only irresponsible, it's a crime." Karen's voice cracked again, but her stubbornness kicked in like fuel to a dying fire. No, you can't do this!" I'm the HOA president. That gives me authority here. You're the one breaking rules." The tallest officer finally stepped in, his patience worn thin. "Ma'am, HOA rules are not criminal law. We're not here to enforce neighborhood paperwork." Karen gasped like he had committed blasphemy. "Not criminal? Do you not understand? Without rules, there's chaos. If people just move out whenever they want, the whole neighborhood falls apart." I couldn't help it, I laughed. After 15 years of her harassment, watching her unravel in front of actual law enforcement was almost sweet. Karen snapped toward me, her eyes wild. "You think this is funny? You think you can just walk away after years of violations and disrespecting this community?" "Karen," I said, my voice calm but steady, "I'm not walking away. I'm driving away with my things. And there's not a single thing you can do to stop me." That's when Karen lost it. She stepped forward, finger practically stabbing the air in front of my son's face. "And you, detective or not, you're abusing your authority. This is collusion. You're conspiring against me." The other officers tensed, their hands subtly drifting toward their belts, unsure if she might escalate further. My son, however, didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, his voice low, steady, and cutting like a knife. "Ma'am, you're on very thin ice. Right now, you've admitted to calling us here under false claims. You've harassed a lawful homeowner, interfered with his right to move freely, and disturbed the peace of this entire block. That's obstruction, and it's arrestable." The word hung in the air, arrestable. Karen blinked rapidly, her breath hitching. No, you wouldn't dare." My son took a slow step forward, his tone unyielding. "Try me." The two junior officers moved in, ready to act. Karen's hands flew up defensively, but her mouth didn't stop. "This is an outrage. I'll sue all of you. The HOA will have your badges, your jobs, your pensions. You'll regret this." Her tirade was cut short by the sharp click of metal. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut was like music to my ears. The officers guided her arms behind her back as she shrieked. Neighbors emerged fully now, some with phones out, recording the spectacle. Curtains rustled, and whispers traveled down the street like wildfire. "You can't do this to me," she howled, her voice echoing. "I am the hoe." But no one was listening anymore. For the first time in years, Karen's power crumbled. She was no longer the untouchable queen of the neighborhood. She was just another person facing the consequences of her own arrogance. As they led her toward the squad car, she turned back one last time, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hatred and desperation. "This isn't over! You'll all regret this day." I leaned against the tailgate, arms crossed, watching her go. For once, I didn't feel powerless. For once, the law was on my side. My son turned to me, his voice softer now. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. "Better than I've been in a long time." The sound of the squad car door slamming shut was like the final punctuation on a chapter I had been waiting years to end. For a long moment, the entire street stood still, suspended in the surreal aftermath of what had just happened. Karen, self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, wielder of HOA rules like weapons, was gone. Hauled off in the back of a police cruiser, her shrieks muffled by the metal and glass barrier between her and the world she once controlled. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It felt like my lungs had been wrapped in chains for 15 years, and suddenly, with one sharp click of handcuffs, those chains had shattered. Around us, neighbors emerged more boldly now. A few held their phones aloft, recording the scene, whispering in hushed tones. "Did you see that? She actually got arrested." Finally, someone stood up to her. Their words carried a strange mix of awe and relief, like a dam had burst and people were finally free to acknowledge the tyranny they had lived under. One woman, Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down, shuffled closer. She was small, fragile-looking, always keeping to herself because Karen once fined her for having too many garden gnomes. Her eyes brimmed with gratitude as she whispered, "Thank you for standing up to her. We all wanted to, but we were scared." I gave her a tired smile. Sometimes it just takes the right moment. My son placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. His presence was steady, calm, protective. "You don't have to deal with her anymore," he said. "She's out of your life now." I nodded, though part of me still buzzed with disbelief. I never thought I'd see the day. The officers lingered for a while, finishing paperwork, taking statements, ensuring everything was in order. Karen's shrieks could still be faintly heard from the cruiser, muffled but unmistakable. "You'll regret this. I own this neighborhood." But as the cars pulled away, her voice faded, swallowed by distance, until all that remained was silence. Sweet, liberating silence. I turned back to the driveway. My life was still scattered across cardboard boxes and packing tape, memories bundled into neat stacks. But suddenly, the sight of those boxes wasn't a burden anymore. It was a promise, a fresh start. I hoisted one box into the truck bed, and my son joined me, lifting another with ease. We worked side by side, the rhythmic thud of boxes sliding into place filling the air. "You know," I said between breaths, "I kept telling myself for years that I could outlast her, that maybe she'd get bored of harassing me, or maybe the HOA would vote her out." My son smirked. "Karen, get bored? Not a chance." "Exactly." I shook my head, chuckling at my own naivety. I wasted so much time letting her control how I lived, the color of my shutters, how long my grass was, whether I could put up Christmas lights. It was like living in a cage you couldn't see but could always feel. He set down a box and leaned against the truck. Dad, you did what a lot of people are too afraid to do. You took back your freedom. Most folks just stay, pay the fines, keep their heads down. But you said enough. His words sank deep, heavier than the boxes we were loading. Maybe for the first time in a long while, I felt proud of myself. We finished the last of the loading just as the sun began its slow descent, streaking the sky with gold and amber. The street, once a battlefield of words and sirens, now seemed almost peaceful. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a backyard down the road, a sound that had been absent during Karen's reign of constant complaint calls. I climbed into the driver's seat of the truck, the leather seat creaking under my weight. My son slid into the passenger side, glancing back at the neatly stacked boxes. Looks like that's everything. I nodded, turning the key. The engine rumbled to life, steady and strong. For a moment, I looked into the rearview mirror. The house stood there, silent and empty, its windows reflecting the fading sunlight. 15 years of my life contained within those walls, some good memories, yes, but overshadowed by the constant tension of living under someone else's thumb. I won't miss it, I said softly, more to myself than anyone. As we rolled down the street, neighbors waved discreetly, some with cautious smiles, others with open relief. They weren't just seeing me leave, they were watching a symbol fall. The stone gates loomed ahead, the same gates Karen once boasted about as proof of security and prestige. I'd always felt trapped behind them, like they weren't gates of pride but bars of a prison. This time, as they receded in the mirror, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. My son rested an arm on the open window, the wind tousling his hair. So, what's the new place like? I smiled, picturing it. Quiet. No rules about what color I can paint my shutters. No fines for leaving my trash can out. Just life, the way it should be. He chuckled. Sounds like paradise. The road stretched ahead, bathed in the last light of day, a ribbon of possibility unfurling into the horizon. I felt lighter with every mile, the weight of Karen's reign shrinking behind me until it was nothing more than a memory. For years I had thought the HOA controlled me, but in the end, it wasn't their rules or their fines that defined me. It was the choice I made to leave, to reclaim my own life, and to find peace beyond their reach. And as the golden glow of the sunset washed over the truck, I realized something. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. That night, as I pulled into the driveway of my new home, I stepped out and breathed in the cool evening air. No stone gates, no surveillance, no Karen. Just silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the faint rustle of trees swaying in the wind. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift completely off my shoulders. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't living under someone else's rules. I was finally truly free. And that's how one man finally broke free from an HOA that tried to control every part of his life. And how the so-called HOA Karen ended up in handcuffs after calling the cops on the wrong family. Sometimes justice comes when you least expect it. And sometimes it arrives wearing a badge. If you enjoyed this dramatic story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Compass Stories, where real-life drama meets unforgettable twists. Until next time, keep your compass pointed toward the truth and your freedom.